let's go to Leanne now, who's standing by with free legal advice.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Carol Ann. It is the season to deck the halls, and it's also the season to watch for slips and falls. David Hollingsworth is a personal injury lawyer. That's one of the topics we're going to be tackling today, is what you should know about slips and falls. We're also going to talk about hosting and liability, but it's true, especially on a day like this when it's cold.
That's right.
You look at all of this very differently.
I do, yeah. Well, JJ was talking about the deep freeze, and it certainly is out there. And with that, of course, comes ice and snow. And a question that we often get asked are sort of what are some of the key things that you need to know about if you suffer a slip and fall or some sort of injury on city property. And so I was asked for 5 things. One of them is that a slip and fall on city property is not the same as on private property. It's governed by the Municipal Act that has its own set of rules. One of those rules is within 10 days of your injury, you have to notify the city, and if you don't, you can be barred from making any sort of claim. And so
10 days.
Yeah, so even if you don't know
so you're still
if you're going to make a claim,
concussed.
There are some exceptions in that, but generally speaking, that you've got to let the city clerk know within 10 days. So even if you don't know if you're going to make a claim, you want to put them on notice. Another thing is that you have to show that the city has been grossly negligent. So on private property, you have to show negligence. But on city property, it's gross negligence, and that is, I mean, they can't be there for every single snowflake and every single pothole instantly, and so you have to show essentially that they kind of knew or ought to have known about the hazard and didn't act on it in a timely way. Another thing about the city is if it does go to a trial and you have a claim, and there can't be a jury against the city. So
those are the key points. I think we've covered 3 so far. The last 2, what would they be, Dave?
Evidence. Evidence is always key. Makes or break the case. Take pictures. Take measurements. Take, if there are witnesses around, get their names and numbers. That makes or break the case.
Okay, well, very interesting, especially at this time of year. Things for you to know. But at this time of year, there are a lot of other things to know, especially if you are attending a party, hosting a party. When it comes to the holidays, I mean, it's joy, fun, and festivity, but there are a lot of liability issues. The main ones being?
Well, yeah, I don't want to be the Grinch. I mean, the main one, everyone wants to have a good time, but if you're hosting a party, you have to do more than throw on your favorite Christmas sweater and roast some chestnuts. It's from the moment people show up at your home, they come on the property, you have to make sure your driveway is cleared, sanded, salted, well lit. Walkway up to your home, the entrance in your home, the shoes and the slippery puddles and all that. You try to avoid all of that kind of thing, obviously, especially if you've got people wearing high heels and stuff. The other big one, obviously, is with respect to alcohol. As the host of the party, you have to be conscious of the state of intoxication of people when they show up at your party, because the second they show up there, if they have 1 drink, you can be tagged with anything that they do afterwards. That relates to anything from, if they get a little too gropey under the mistletoe, especially with office parties. You have to be very cautious of people's behavior with harassment and with respecting others, and then, of course, with the driving. We hear a lot about it, and you can't hear enough about it. As a social host, the door is still open by the Supreme Court of Canada that you can be held liable if you let somebody leave and drive and they cause a problem. So take their keys, insure a designated driver, get taxis, and all of that.
You've painted a lot of pictures for us, and one was the tacky Christmas sweater. I can't quite get that out of my mind. Now, we want to talk about, we talked about homeowners' liability when it comes to hosting a party, but what about just keeping your laneway cleared all the time if someone's delivering mail? These are interesting points because your insurance isn't valid if you're heading away, if you don't have someone check your property, make sure that things are cleared and all the rest.
That's right.
So this is a great time for a little primer on that, and then we're going to get to your calls or to your questions, I promise.
Right. Well, so absolutely, you've got people are going to come to your home. You know they're going to come to your home. You have an obligation to make it free of any hazard. That means ice, snow, whatever kind of hazard that can come in the wintertime. You have an obligation to make sure it's reasonably safe. And if you don't, you are on the hook. Now, if somebody is breaking into your home or they're trespassing, they're deemed to have accepted certain risks, but you expect that for now anyway, the mail delivery person is going to be there. You expect that there are going to be people coming to your home, especially this time of year.
The trespassers and the robbers are less likely to press, or to file a claim.
You'd be surprised.
David has brought along, actually they're your calls, or they're your questions, and they're really good. And so a little bit later in the program, he is going to answer what you want to know about the law.
We're going to go back out to Leanne now and Dave Hollingsworth to take your legal questions.
Oh, and Carol Ann, we have some fabulous questions, some very topical seasonal questions as well. The first one was about the liabilities in hosting a party. You have definitely covered that ground already, sir. So we're going to move on to number 2, and I know this will resonate with so many of you. My neighbor is having snow removal done, and they always pile it on my property. What can I do to stop this? I mean, you get tons of calls and questions about things like that.
Absolutely, and leaves in the fall, snow in the winter. Obviously, the first approach is to talk to them, but assuming that that has been exhausted, if you needed to bring court action, you would bring what's called an injunction. You would go to the court and you ask the court to tell them they're no longer allowed to do it. And you would have your evidence as to why and what harm it's causing you. And then I guess in the end, if they do continue to do it and there is damage done to your property, your recourse is to, you know, sue them, I guess, in small claims court for new sod or new flowers or whatever it is.
No one wants to deal with this.
No.
So the best thing to do is to hope that you can avoid being litigious and work it out with the neighbor.
Yeah.
This is a very common one, a common question. I was badly injured in an accident. Is there any way for me to get compensation even though I was at fault? You deal with this all the time. So someone's injured, they're at fault. Is there compensation?
Right. Firstly, regardless of who's at fault in an accident in Ontario, you're entitled to accident benefits, which would give you stuff, you know, like medical rehabilitation, income replacement, and certain key benefits. But in terms of at fault, sometimes people get a ticket, but you know, they may be partially at fault, but the other driver may also be at fault. Maybe the other driver was speeding, or there may be some contributory negligence. So we always investigate that. And maybe you're 80% at fault, but if they're 20% at fault, you might be entitled to some compensation. So we really do investigate that.
Interesting. Okay, have you ever been called for jury duty? I've been called for jury duty. Do I have to go? This viewer wants to know.
Well, it is your civic responsibility to be a jury member if you've been called to go. The juries are selected from the list of names that for the enumerated voters. And so, you know, you may get a mail out and you're just being asked to be on a panel. Then they select from that panel a jury for certain trials. If you don't want to go because you have a legitimate reason, like you are a caregiver for somebody, or you're an emergency responder, like an ambulance driver, doctors, lawyers, and nurses are not allowed to be members of the jury. If you are a key person in a business, you can often get out of it. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll allow you to postpone your jury time. Say, I can't do it now for these reasons. Let me do it later. But so there are ways out of it, but you have to provide the Attorney General with a reasonable explanation, and they have to accept it.
And it has to be reasonable. So what if you move and it doesn't find you? Are you then, you know, is there a way you could get into trouble for not having shown up? Does it follow you?
Yes. I mean, assuming they were prepared to go through the hassle of tracking people down who don't respond, you know, a reasonable explanation that you don't show up, I guess, is that it didn't find you because you moved. That would be probably deemed a reasonable explanation.
This one is quite the question. My son was at a bar and was beaten up by a bouncer. It's not can we sue? It's who can we sue? That's the question. Yeah,
well, I mean, I guess the question should be, can we sue? Obviously, there are going to be multiple sides to this story, but assuming that, you know, you would normally go after the bar, because presumably if you're in the state where you're getting into fights with bouncers or beaten up by a bouncer, you've probably been overserved, and the bar may not have followed the smart serve requirements. So you would name the bar likely, the bouncer who did the assault, and then if there's a company that the bouncer works for, you may name them for improperly training the bouncer and whatnot.
Here's a will question. My ex-husband and I drafted wills together. I have a new one, but I don't want to be responsible for anything under his will. What should I do?
Well, firstly, if they were married and they're divorced, wills become null and void on a divorce. But secondly, if somebody's named you as an estate trustee or an executor under a will, you don't have to do that. You can opt out of doing that. You know, you can't just randomly name somebody and then all of a sudden they're stuck with having to do it. So
because there's a lot of work involved.
There can be a ton of work involved. You get involved in family situations that you may not want to be a part of.
So you're able to decline.
You're able to decline. I guess in this case, if there were joint debts or something like that, she might be on the hook. But you want to deal with your debts through the divorce process.
I'm going to ask you to tackle power of attorney in 45 seconds.
Okay.
Sorry about that, but here's the question. My mother is ill. My siblings and I have been talking about trying to figure out if we need a power of attorney. What is power of attorney? Okay,
power of attorney, this would be a power of attorney for personal care. Sounds like it'd be a good idea. So what your mother would do, provided she's got capacity, is that she would sign over the right for decisions to be made about her personal care to you and your siblings to be made, likely in consultation with her physicians, whoever are treating her, in the event that she's unable to do it.
But this is something that you would like to hammer home that everyone needs.
Yes, it's a valuable document. The power of attorney for property is a different story. It's a dangerous document because you give it to somebody, they can go and clear out your bank account. But for personal care, it makes a lot of sense, especially for family members. It's a very good idea. Yes.
Okay, we want to thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me.
And of course, David Hollingsworth is with OttawaInjury.ca. If you have any questions, we would love for you to send them along to David. If you would like to have your question answered on the show, by all means, do that. It's a great opportunity to get some stellar free legal advice. Carol Ann, thanks,
Leanne.
Thank you.